The family is certainly the first unit of socialization, if not the most important one. Sociologists will debate which social institution is the most important one. And many say family, though some will argue that the economy controls resources, thus individual opportunity, and thus the economy is most important. But importance aside, let's talk some about what the institution of the family does do for individuals. It's the first place of socialization. It's the first place a child learns to interact with others. It's also a primary agent of cultural transmission. In sociological terms, culture is referring to the characteristics and the knowledge of a particular group of people that's defined by everything from language, religion, food they eat, social habits, music, and arts. And the first place a child learns these things is through family members. And I said before, it also regulates sexual behavior. Little children learn that you don't do certain things like touch themselves in public or touch other children inappropriately. Some families highly regulate and condemn sexual activity in adolescence, and some families take a more hands-off approach as the adolescent grows older. When I talk about cultural transmission, a part of that is the idea of social norms that are considered appropriate for each subculture. Now, norms, they're not static, and indeed they can change from time to time. Norms in all aspects of life have changed rapidly in the past decade or so. And when this happens, it can severely challenge the old traditions. And remember, the family is the place where traditions are passed on from one generation to the next. One big factor, too, in social change is technology. Technology gives us a new way of doing things. For example, our society changed from a courtship model for seeking partners, and by that I mean 100 years ago, folks courted rather than dated when they were seeking a marriage partner, to a dating model because of what technology? Because of what technology? Because of the automobile. Now, the internet has created a new way of meeting people. So again, we see how technology can change social arrangements. But at the same time, as we're having rapid changes in technology and thus creating different kinds of social arrangements, we also have social institutions that are slow to change. Social institutions may lag behind the times in creating new norms and social roles to accommodate that change. Social institutions are slow to change, and norms and social roles are slow to evolve. Well, that might at first might at first consideration seem dysfunctional, I just want to remind you to think about the idea that there's a certain amount of wisdom in the old ways of doing things. The traditions are there because they were functional at one point in time. And figuring out the best way of doing things can take some time, even when new technologies are telling us that the old traditions no longer work. Our social institutions have been around for thousands of years, and technology has been advancing at unprecedented speed in the past 50 to 100 years. So norms and changes in traditional roles have been more rapid than they ever have been in human history. Think in terms of what globalization has done in regards to social change. Globalization is only 40 years old. If you were to consider the advent of rapid speed commercial jet travel and the globalization of industry and the economy, that's what I'm talking about when I speak about globalization. So globalization was one of the biggest changes in social arrangements human beings have ever experienced as a species, and our norms and social arrangements had to change to accommodate this shift. I want to challenge you to think in terms of how technology facilitates change, how these different technologies have changed social norms because there are new ways of doing things and new opportunities. Think about the printing press. Now information can be disseminated to large masses of people. That was in the 1600s. Think about the United States Post Office. Even more broad dissemination of information back in the early 1900s. Then came television and radio. That's the quick transmission of information to the masses. And think about air travel. That is actually what increased diversity on a global basis, diversity in all societies that had access to air travel. And our tolerance for diversity increases. And then finally, there's the internet. Massive, instant, highly private, large amounts of information, meaning big files, can be shared instantly. The point is that norms have not caught up with the technologies in many ways. So let's ponder some of these questions in regards to what it means for human sexuality. How do we develop norms for internet and what people do on the internet? A great question. Is cybersex cheating? Some people think it is, others think it's just fantasy play. Then, what are the norms for meeting people online for an online dating situation? So think about the internet. It's the same revolutionary change for today's single person as what the automobile was for the person in the 40s. Now the automobile allows for dating. It's this private place where people can leave and go and do whatever a couple wants to do in a dating relationship. Whereas prior to that, we had the courtship model of dating, where a man would go and visit a woman at her home and stay with the parents, perhaps be chaperoned by an older brother if they left the house together as a couple. So the automobile creates revolutionary change for dating, and that's how we seek out our couples. And then think in terms of the pill, what the pill did to change relationships in the 1960s. The pill allowed for a reliable contraceptive method that could be planned and would prevent pregnancy 99.9% of the time if it was used properly, and that changed relationships between men and women as far as sexual relations are concerned. So technology controls change because it controls the way we do things and the opportunities we have, and then that transforms how we conduct our social relationships. And there's many other examples regarding technology and how it changes sexual relationships. So getting back to the family and thinking about what it is to be a family, and how might technology then change family relationships, and what kinds of norms then are needed to emerge or evolve now to accommodate those types of changes. Mothers no longer need to be the primary nurturer. Marriage now is not just between a man and a woman. Legally, as of 2015, it can be between two men and two women. Sex is no longer for procreation as it was prior to the 1960s. And conception can even happen after a parent is deceased. We'll talk about that more in the next unit. And conception can even happen without the parents ever meeting. So let's define family so we can think further about how society has changed and what that means to the family. One simple definition of family is a social group whose members are related by ancestry, marriage, or adoption, and that live together, cooperate together economically, and care for the young. We also have the American vision of the Kodak family, and that's a vision that's driven by American culture. But even in the U.S., that's only 1 in 5 families. In other societies, families are structured somewhat differently. And in the U.S. too, there's the concept of the extended family. Think in terms of what a kin group means. That's a larger group that interacts regularly and provides support, financial or emotional support, and they share in the general household chores. A kin group can refer to the larger network of adults that are related either by blood or marriage. In some societies, these kinds of families will live in one large house or shelter. Sometimes it's called a longhouse, where the larger kin group would live together. So now today we see many different kinds of family arrangements. We accept more and more gay and lesbian families, or heterosexual couples that don't marry and just cohabitate. Andrew Cherlin, who is probably the most noted sociological theorist on the family, he has stated that the nature of families have shifted, so that 40% of children are now born outside of marriage. Many of these children have both parents present. The adults may be cohabitating, but the point is that children are born outside of marriage, which is a shift in the norms and cultural expectations. Understand, too, that what is a family and what the state recognizes for the purpose of many different rights and entitlements can profoundly affect individuals. For many years, lesbian and gay couples who were prevented from marrying could not have the same benefits that married couples could have. Important benefits, such as Social Security, insurance benefits. Sometimes those issues, they can be cured with things like domestic partner benefits clauses, such as insurance that's offered by an employer, but that's only if the employer would allow for domestic partner benefits. Now that has all changed with the Obergefell case in 2015 that said that states had to grant marriage licenses to same-sex partners, but effectuating that change is slow too. So the benefits that we're talking about affect a large range of day-to-day social arrangements and opportunities of the individual as well. These are things like health benefits, adoptions, guardianships, probate status and inheritance, and Social Security. And indeed, we talked about some of those benefits in specific cases when we talked about some of the cases. I want to step back now to that idea that I presented to you earlier, that social arrangements and norms change when presented with new opportunities, because these new ways of doing things shift our social arrangements. The example I want to present is changes in patterns in courtship. Mate selection has been around as long as the human species has been on this earth. When Europeans came to the U.S., they brought with them the norms of mate selection via the courtship model. In the U.S., before the advent of the automobile, men who sought a mate would generally travel to the woman's home and stay there for a considerable amount of time. They were heavily monitored by the parents, and if the couple wanted to venture outside the confines of the home, an older brother or perhaps an uncle would chaperone the couple. As cities grew and automobiles became commonplace, the manner in which men and women met and the manner in which they developed an initial relationship changed. Now they could venture out together more easily, and the automobile provided not just transportation to other events or meeting up with another couple in the city, but also a private place in which things other than just talking might be able to take place. This is a great example of how technology increases opportunities to do things, and that social arrangements change due to these new opportunities. One of the most important tasks in life is to find a suitable mate, and the automobile transformed that task within one generation's span of time. Another quick note is that the shift from rural to urban also facilitated this change, because in an urban setting there are better roads, remember we're talking the 1930s through the 1950s, and more places that are worth traveling to, with shorter distances between. But it's this general idea of technology being truly an organizing principle of society, and how changes in technology can have great impact in our social arrangements, that I want you to get from this example. That affected gay and lesbian couples.